Welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast, a podcast for creatives. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi. Join me for compelling conversations with artists, actors, authors, musicians, and other creatives about the impact of the creative and fine arts in their lives and our ever-changing world. Thank you for listening. Hello, welcome to another episode of Creative Piecemeal Podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi. Today, I am joined by my friend and fellow creative, Chavaz Kingman. He's a consultant, coach, entrepreneur, and speaker known for his incomparable ability to both recognize and realize individual and organizational talent and potential. By focusing on the human aspects of being a professional, he serves fellow professionals by helping them uncover and maximize their innate talent. I'm so excited to have you join me on the show today.
Thanks, Tammy. What a wonderful, wonderful intro. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. So before we jump into questions, a few announcements. It's November. So of course, I'm very thankful and grateful for every listener and every guest. It has been almost a year since I've launched this podcast back in January of 2021. And it's been very fulfilling and rewarding. Just wanted to let you all know that I'm taking a short holiday hiatus to get some more interviews done and take a little break. But please watch the socials and my newly launched Patreon account for announcements, behind the scenes snaps, and more. If you'd like to check out the Patreon page, look for the link in the show notes. And I'm really excited about what's to come in 2022 and can't wait to share that. All right, Chavaz, you ready?
I am ready, and happy 1 year anniversary. Congratulations on launching the podcast a year ago.
It's been super fun.
I bet. I hear the hardest part is just starting. So that is awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. So you are also very creative, and some people may not know, but you're very musical. And you've used that creativity to become an entrepreneur. But what else or who else has inspired you to move to that role?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think a lot of people have inspired me. Actually, for those who are listening who don't know, Tammy and I went to the same high school, and one of my high school teachers, her name is Miss Smith, was an English teacher who inspired me to combine not just my creativity, but also the aspects of being a professional into my day-to-day activities. So she was helping me with some competitive speaking, and she always kind of drilled in our heads that even though you may be a creative person, apply different aspects of professionalism in that, because you should still be a professional as you are being a creative. So she's definitely one of the people who have inspired me. My mother, unquestionably, my mother has always been not just a guiding influence, but somebody who has really contributed to, I even dare say, me being the man that I am today in so many incomparable ways that I could never, speak of anyone inspiring me without mentioning her. So definitely my mother, Miss Smith. Some of my other just teachers, I always say that too often we overlook the impact that our teachers have on us. And for me, my teachers, whether it was in grade school or in college, or even some mentors and teachers that I've had in my professional career, have all been major influences for me creatively and professionally.
I would agree. Teachers really have such a wonderful impact.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting, though. I was actually speaking to somebody who I know who teaches third grade. And, I was thinking there are so many teachers that I can think of the exact moment where the light bulb went off for me. And I think there are so many adults where we can think of those teachers who were those game changers for us, but how many of us actually go back and say thank you to those teachers? So I think sometimes I try to be intentional to, at least, especially with social media, reach out to some of the teachers I had and say, hey, FYI, I appreciate the impact that you've made on my life, because that's such an admirable role in my eyes, I think such an admirable role.
I definitely agree. And you talked about how Miss Smith taught you about professionalism. And I definitely think, especially in 2021 and going into 2022, entrepreneurs and creative people almost have to, if they're not already entrepreneurs, need that business savvy, professionalism, speaking skills, social media, and marketing. Do you have any tips or advice on people who are trying to really navigate those waters?
The first thought that popped into my mind when you said that is, get used to change, because things are constantly changing in all of the aspects of social media. I was actually listening to Melody Hobson, who is George Lucas's wife. I believe now she may be president of Ariel Investments. I'll have to verify what her exact title is, but that she was giving this talk where she said she had to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that that's a key point for anyone, whether they're in a creative field or not. Right now things are changing with Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. All of these tools are methods of engagement. And so for people who are creative, I think you have to learn to leverage these tools in a way that's professional, clear, concise, but also engaging, while still being true to who you are as a person. And I think that that's where some of the challenge can come in, because you see so many things where people just transform, or I guess dilute some of their authentic selves or their creativity to try to get in line with a perceived algorithm or perceived trend. And so I think I would just tell people to kind of go against that grain, stay true to your authentic self, stay true to your creativity, and just be yourself, be flexible, be ready for the constant change that's happening. And yeah, I mean, that's just the kind of preliminary random thoughts that just spewed out of my mind as you asked that question. So
And that's really great advice. As we've seen, like MySpace has gone away many years ago, and then back when Facebook was new, there's definitely an evolution in connecting with people across the years.
yeah, and I think that's the common thread as far as in the thing that hasn't changed, which is the human connection that all of it brings. And so it's all in it kind of goes back to the message that I speak on constantly is, focusing on the people aspects of whatever you're doing, focusing on, how can I make this human? How can I connect with others and be my authentic self through it?
Excellent. And speaking of connecting, did you have any barriers to reaching where you are in your career?
I was actually thinking today of the blessing that some of those perceived barriers would, ended up being, I should say, because I think I've always been someone who has raised his hand to say, hey, I will take on this difficult role, or I will take on this difficult task. So I know that there are a lot of conversations out there right now about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I do think that in retrospect, there have been some times that, maybe I didn't know that different things were playing a factor. And now that I have educated myself, I'm able to recognize when those things kind of arise more. So the best way to answer that question is that at time, and in the past, I don't think I always saw what those barriers were. I just kind of pushed through them because I was very focused on the goal. But now that I know more, I see what those barriers were, and I'm very grateful that I learned how to navigate those situations without focusing on kind of the more emotional or the more sensitive aspects of what those barriers could have been, to a younger Chavaz who may not have been as mature or may not have had as clear vision. So I'm glad that I know now, but I really consider pushing through those barriers and taking on different challenges to be a blessing now.
There's always seems to be a lesson to be learned in every opportunity, whether it's positive or negative.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I look at so many things now as, okay, Shabazz, this is something new. How are you going to expand your tool set or enlarge the way that you are thinking or your mindset so that you can approach it? Because I think too often if we just focus on a barrier or focus on something as a, quote unquote negative, I think too often we focus on just the dark side of that as opposed to the light that is there, that's at the end of that tunnel or that's existing. But it's all about perception sometimes.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, it's the whole glass half full, glass half empty type thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it actually just made me think. I heard this kind of anecdote many, many years ago, and it was a story about two brothers that were entering the same city, and they were both coming from one city going to another, and they both came up to the same gatekeeper. And the first brother asked the gatekeeper, "So, what are the people like in this new city?" And the gatekeeper said, "Well, tell me about what the people were like in the city you just came from." And the first brother said, "Oh, well, they were just nasty, terrible, horrible people." And he said, "Oh, okay, then you can expect to see the same thing in this new city that you approach." And then the second brother asked the same gatekeeper the exact same question. "Tell me, what are the people like in the city?" And he said, and the gatekeeper says, "What are the people like in the city that you just came from?" And he said, "Oh, well, they're just wonderful and they're warm and they're kind." And he said, "Well, you can expect the same thing from this new city that you're moving into." And for some reason, when I heard that story, I realized, Shabazz, so much of the way that you look at life is kind of like that gatekeeper. Like, are you constantly looking at your past and expecting and kind of that same thing from everyone? Or are you going to say, what, this is a new city. Maybe people are going to be different. Maybe I need to look at things in a different way. What's my perspective on all of it?
I've not heard that before, but it's so impactful and it really.
Yeah. I hope I articulated it well, but
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. And it really gets the point across that perception and perspective really can, no pun intended, open up a person's eyes to different opportunities they didn't have before. On that topic, what do you know to be true today that you didn't know even a year ago?
I can. That's been an important lesson. During the quarantine, took a really, really intentional effort to focus on self-improvement, because I thought, if the world is kind of calmed down, then I thought it would just be a mismanagement of my time not to hold up a mirror and say, "Shabazz, what can you do to better yourself and better the world once it does open up?" And so I think the best way to answer that is, what I do know for certain now is I can. I work very, very hard on intentionally extracting the negative voices of others that I'd heard before. Because I think too often, especially sometimes when it's somebody who means a lot to you, and that could be any sort of relationship, whether it's a manager, a teacher, a relative, we sometimes internalize those voices a little bit more than we should. For me, I spent specifically the past year, spending time with myself, spending time with God, knowing who I am, knowing what my voice is, and then realizing, oh, so maybe when that person told me that I couldn't, that had more to do with them than it had to do with me. And so maybe I should take this endeavor. Maybe I should reach within myself and see what ideas are kind of lying, within what talent, what potential do I have that I kind of was afraid of bringing forth? What creativity lies within me that I have yet to bring out to the world because of the fear of I can't? So the truth that I know now is I can. And I just have to figure out what that path is to bring that forth. And sometimes that path is going out there and exploring the world. And sometimes that path is sitting in silence and taking out the, negative voices and negative things that people have told you to find your own voice. So I can would be the just 2-word answer to that question.
Oh, that's fantastic. And definitely something that I think everyone probably needs to remember from time to time. And self-care is so important. So that's great you had that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
You were talking a little bit about creativity and finding things that you wanted to bring out. But hypothetically, if you woke up tomorrow and you could be perfect at any creative art,
Ooh.
what would that be?
Well, that's an interesting one, because my definition of perfection in art is, while there's training, I think perfection is also the individuality that comes from it. So for me, I was someone who is exceptionally passionate about singing. So even just kind of like the tone and vibrato of somebody's voice can be very imperfectly perfect, in my opinion. So all of those things to me. So that when you say perfect, that's an interesting word. What would I want to? I don't know. There used to be that saying of the triple threat. The actor, singer, dancer. So I think because of just my background, I would have to just answer with the triple threat kind of.
That would be really cool to see you in a musical.
I have not done a musical in a very, very long time. So yeah, it's interesting, because I think it was maybe a week or so ago, I got in from the gym and heard the acoustics in my apartment. I thought, oh, These are really good acoustics. I haven't really actually sang in a while. And so I sat down and sang for a bit and I thought, oh, wow, I really do absolutely love music. So we'll see. We'll see what's on the horizon where that's concerned.
And you've got such a buttery, beautiful voice. It would be a shame to not dust off your pipes and do some singing.
I will say that I'm having some conversations in that regard as far as in some instruction. So I'll leave it at that for now.
There you go. Keeping life a mystery here.
Well, and I've actually found that it's being able to express myself musically is such a release from sometimes, I'm looking at data and spreadsheets and emails sometimes 12, 14 hours a day. And what I've realized is even as an entrepreneur and even as somebody who's constantly looking at big data, it's just that release of being able to sing, or that release of sometimes I'm watching the Met on demand, or something musical, and it for me it makes me feel like I've touched base with home. It makes me feel like I've hit reset, to allow that creativity and not just that analytical part of my brain to work. And it's just it's indescribably confirming, affirming, and peaceful.
If we were to sneak a peek at your music collection, what are some things you listen to a lot?
I do listen to a lot of opera, but I also listen to a lot of like 90s music. So of course, and I think everybody, Whitney Houston is still in my playlist. Um,
She's fantastic.
right, yeah. So Whitney Houston, actually, do you know what one of kind of my go-tos that I listen to that's not in my actual playlist, but it's in my YouTube playlist, is Renee Fleming singing Costa Diva. That her performance in that always gives me chills. So some things like that.
That's excellent. And kudos to the 90s music. Love the 90s music.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, and it's interesting how music has evolved. I think I just added some 60s and 50s music in there as well. Like I was listening to like Elvis Presley, The Wonder of You, and stuff like that. So it's my music catalog is very, very diverse.
Awesome. As it should be, it really helps get the brain going, listening to different diverse
It
music.
does. It does.
We're going to sort of
change gears
a little bit. Yes, you stole the words right out of my mouth. I was wondering, what is one of the biggest challenges you have right now in your specific role of what you do? And, what would you like to do to overcome that?
The challenges that I see right now aren't specific just to my role. I think the challenge that I'm seeing right now is, I think the challenge is global, and that is human connection. I think right now people are being burned out with Zoom meetings. As much as we like the digital face-to-face, I think that there's something about being physically in the room with somebody and gaining, like really gleaning off their energy and how things are going when you're physically in someone's presence. So I think that's a challenge that we're all facing as professionals. I've not come to a conclusion yet on how I feel about where social media is headed in either helping or harming that connection that we're all longing for. But it is something, however, to kind of link back to the arts, that it makes me confident that things like live theater, live performances will never, ever go away, because of the fact that we love to be in those settings of audience and artists, that connection that is it's just an incomparable connection. It's an incomparable feeling that you're not going to get on YouTube, you're not going to get on Spotify or Apple Music. It's completely different, and I dare say sometimes even sacred, when you have that connection between artist and audience. And so while I love that Broadway's opening back up, I love that the Met is opened again, as far as professionally speaking in my role, I think that it is a challenge because I work remotely. I know a lot of people are working remotely, so I think the challenge is just how do we ensure that we continue to have authentic human connections that are not limited to our devices.
I would concur.
Yeah. I know I took that answer in a couple different areas, but it's just what my true thoughts and passions are.
Yeah. No, I mean, you bring up so many good points, and I've had several artists who have been on the podcast, and they said it was like life changing when they couldn't perform, and they had to find other creative outlets because they missed the stage. They missed being able to connect with the audience. And then when it opened back up again, how it just was so filling to their soul.
Yeah, it's such an indescribable feeling, I think, Tammy. It really, really is. Yeah, I think that's why I use the word sacred, because I do think that there is kind of a bit of a sacred connection between the artist and the audience, whether it's an audience of 1, 10, 1,000, like there's just a different connection.
And it rings true too in businesses and meetings and presentations and conferences, because you're still trying to captivate an audience to sell a product, or captivate an audience to explain about your business plan for the next 5 years.
Absolutely, Tammy. And it's one of the things that I think has made me successful, even in my meetings, whether it's annual report or, a new product presentation, knowing how to connect with the audience, knowing what they value. It's been an incomparable tool that I've been able to pull out really from my background in the performing arts.
So does that mean you sing for them as an icebreaker?
Some have asked. Some have asked. I will say that I've had that request before, but I have yet to do that. I have yet to do it, but I've had that request.
You never know, folks. You never know.
Maybe I'll do it at some point. Maybe.
There you go. Little known fact is, and I didn't do it for you, but sometimes as an icebreaker before I roll cameras for the podcast, I'll sing to guests.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you know what my favorite icebreaker is? And it's my favorite because it was life-changing for me. One of my mentors told me, so I'll share it with you and your audience. My favorite icebreaker, especially for when I go into business meetings, is to ask what's right. We always ask people, oh, Tammy, what's wrong? What's wrong? And so when we approach conversations by starting with, hey, Tammy, what's right? I mean, it's just a game changer. So that's one of my favorite icebreakers.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I love that. And it's such a positive.
So yeah, I even in my personal life, you'll find I ask people, hey, what's right? So instead of asking people what's wrong, I always start what's right, focusing on those good things.
And you were talking about the marriage of business and art. I was wondering, what are some of the biggest sectors of those areas that you're curious about right now?
For specifically right now, what the kind of big conversation is big data. And I think that what everybody wants to know is, what does that mean? Everyone's collecting so much data. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about is using data to tell stories. Now that we have all this data, what are we going to do with it? What is the story that the data is telling? And even right now, in a lot of the things that I do, I find what the story is. What is the actual human connection or the human journey that I can communicate? And to me, that is creativity, that is art, because I think that no matter what the art is, there's a story to be told there, and it's human. More often than not, it's the humanity, it's the human aspects of what we are presenting that's going to create that connection, be it emotional, intellectual, whatever it is. It's story, that creative element of story, I guess, that brings us together as human beings. So
you've really come so far since the beginnings, and
yeah.
And I'm so proud. I'm so proud to see all of your, all of your posts and your accomplishments throughout the years.
So
and
much.
I was curious, is there something you wish you'd known when you first started, or do you feel like your journey has been exactly what it was meant to be?
In some ways, I feel like my journey has been what it should be, because I think when I was a teenager, for example, I expected my journey to just be, oh man, I'm going to be an opera singer and I'm going to do this and that. And I took a change and went into the business world. But because of the foundation that I had with the arts, I feel like I've been a much more authentic professional, if that makes sense. I think that I've been a lot more empathetic in regard to relating to not just the customers or even executives that I deal with, but even some of the people that I've managed. So I feel like my journey has been, it's not what I thought it would have been, but I'm glad it is what it has been. And this, I'm sorry, the second question you asked again was, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, if there's anything you wish you'd known when you first started.
I wish I would have known that everything's going to be okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think I wasted a lot of time with fear and worry and anxiety. And had I known, Shabazz, it's going to be okay, I think I could have been more productive in the way that I used my time, as opposed to worrying or sitting in a room with, being anxious about certain thoughts, or recycling different thoughts, or recycling different behaviors of myself or others. So I think I wish I would have known, Shabazz, just trust everything's going to be okay.
That's so relatable. I mean, everybody has those worries and those fears and thinking,
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen
Mm-hmm.
in a year from now? Even the most confident of people have worries.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's always easier said than done, isn't it?
Right. Oh my gosh. Right. I think I'm still working on some of that. So I'm definitely, we're all a work in progress.
Yeah. I think that's part of what makes it such a beautiful life.
That's exactly what makes it such a beautiful life, not just knowing that you're a work in progress, but also knowing that others are a work in progress, and accepting those things and seeing what you can both learn together as well. Absolutely.
And speaking of that, what are some of the best resources you recommend for others wanting to better themselves or their businesses?
Very often we overlook the things that are right in front of us. I admit, even recently, I sat down and kind of took an inventory of the books and the relationships that I already have. So when you talk about resources, the first thing that comes to my mind is relationship. Who are the people that you already know? I think very often, people come up with ideas and then they don't filter them through their immediate circle of friends or their immediate circle of colleagues. And I'm not saying filter in a way of, what to completely do away with, but filter in regard to iterate. How can I make this better? Or how can I at least collaborate with someone? So I think a great resource is your immediate circle of friends, your immediate relatives, your immediate colleagues. Other resources, to be completely candid, a public library. So I think we are so blessed to have the resource of books. Yes, YouTube is great. All of these tools that we have on the internet are fantastic, but I strongly encourage people sometimes to actually just go to a library and get a book, read it, because especially with biographies, that's somebody who's literally written out their life experience for you to learn from. I think definitely books, education are resources that are just a little bit underutilized, because I think we have a flood of information. But, I always say, with all that information and even with all of that data, doesn't necessarily mean that we've gotten the insight or the wisdom from it. So I think the two top things to answer your question would be your immediate relationships and books, resources like libraries that are already there, completely free.
And all the librarians listening to the podcast are cheering.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit, for me, there was a time, and I recall very, very clearly, it was around when I was 20 or 21, when I was in my office at work, and I was sitting there and I said, Shabazz, you can either, go out and go to the clubs, or you can do something to better yourself. And I recall that was really the moment that I decided, Shabazz, you're going to start reading. You're going to start helping others more than focusing on the next party or the next club that you want to go to with your friends, And sometimes it is evaluating your friends, your group of friends, to see, am I even in the right group of friends that are in line with where I want to go? So I think it's always important to do those inventories and see what you're doing that maybe is no longer serving you.
And speaking of books, do you have a favorite author or a favorite book that's really been inspiring or impactful in your life?
Well, I grew up, my mother always taught us to read the Bible. So I think if she's listening to this podcast, I'll have to say the Bible just for her. So yeah, but aside from that, some of my favorite books are usually like business books on communication and things like that. One of my all-time favorite books is a book that Gallup published, called "It's the Manager," and it just speaks on the importance of the middle manager and kind of the direction that companies go, and the success of the organization, and then a lot of different aspects of just management that book covers. So that's definitely one of my favorite books, because I often tell executives and employees that their relationship with that middle level of management is so crucial. So that's always been one of my favorites, just because of the key insights that Gallup has provided in that book.
Yeah, and that definitely sounds like one of those impactful books for people who are in business, and even people who maybe are in the entry level and want to learn more.
Even if you're not in business though, Tammy, like I've applied so many business skills and things I've learned from business books in my personal life as well. So for me, it's about being able to transfer your skills, whether it's in the arts or business or whatever it is, to making yourself a whole person. Like, so I think any knowledge, any information that you can get, whether it's from a book like Gallup's book, It's the Manager, or if it's from whatever resource that you're reading, I think information can be applied in so many ways. And I don't know exactly I forgot what the exact terminology is, but it's where you combine unlike things in your brain and then you come up with something new. I'll have to look it up, but anyway. So like having more information just helps the brain to kind of make unrelated connections. So I'm always looking at different things to learn and different ways to make new connections and create new things from that.
Nice. I must say, as a person who's more on the creative world and not so much on the business world, it's so refreshing to talk to someone who has a foot in both worlds and understands that.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. I will say that I think it's something that has allowed me to stand out even as a professional, because I think too often as business professionals, we focus so much on just our data, our spreadsheets, our reporting, that we forget the humanity of what we do. And so for me, being someone with a creative background and somebody who's intentional to incorporate creativity into what I do daily, I think that allows me to continue to focus on the fact that I'm dealing with human beings. And I read a quote a while back that said, "Businesses don't make decisions, people do." And I think that's so true. And so I think when you allow yourself to be creative, and then put the business aspects into that, I think that's when you can really have something that's really impactful and powerful.
I'm not a business person, but speaking as a person who's been an employee at various jobs in my life, I definitely think that, having the opportunity to, I guess, invoke creativity into the business, whether it's creative problem solving or creative business meetings, really helps to inspire employees and sort of, buoy them through difficult times, or so there's not burnout.
Absolutely. I mean, and you can tell me, have you had a manager who's allowed you to express your creativity in a way that you felt valued?
In some jobs, yes, and others,
Hmm.
no.
Hmm.
It's really 50-50 depending on, what the job has been.
Yeah, yeah. And you can tell the difference, can't you?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. I think that when a manager allows an employee to express their innate gifts, their innate creativity, not only are you going to reduce the likelihood of that employee leaving the company, because of course, employee retention is a key component of all conversations right now, especially with remote work and the way where business is going. But I think when managers allow their employees to be creative and say, "Hey, I came up with this idea," actually, a prime use case that just popped into my mind was I want to say that it's Google that allowed their employees X amount of time to just work on something that they were passionate about, and I think that it was from that an employee came up with Gmail, just by, yeah. And so of course now we have the whole Google suite. And so it's just by allowing employees to be creative that corporations can really propel not just their employee satisfaction, but also their product offerings as well, because when you allow creativity to flow, you allow an increase in collaboration, you allow an increase, really you save time, I should say, because people are vocalizing their ideas, they're expediting processes. I can go on with this for a while, so I'll digress there.
Yeah, it's almost like the sky's the limit
When
when
creativity is allowed, yeah, it really, really is. It's I think creativity is such an innate part of human nature that, and especially as I think of startups, I think of executives who had an idea, implemented the idea, And then I think sometimes it can be a little bit absurd to then try to stifle the ideas of employees. It's like, well, as an entrepreneur, didn't you have an idea? Didn't you come up with an idea that you wanted to implement? So I strongly recommend people to encourage their coworkers, to encourage their team members, to encourage everyone they work with to bring their ideas to their table, bring their innate curiosities and creativity forth, because I think that it also increases teamwork and that bond that you feel with each other. In addition to increasing the business's bottom line, there are just countless benefits. So
Definitely. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with more creativity in the world for sure.
never, never. And and the thing about it is, I think that we all possess creativity in abundance. I think that the thing is just when we allow ourselves and we allow others to express that freely without judgment.
Mhm. That actually leads really beautifully to our last question for today, which is, in your own words, what does living a creative life mean to you?
That's the question I think you ask everyone, isn't it?
I do try when I remember.
Living a creative life to me means bringing something forth to benefit others. I think creativity is an act of service. I don't think that it's selfish in any way. I think that when we create, we are bringing forth something that we came up with, whether it's fashion or music or a document or a presentation. That's something that you created. And I think the service aspect of it is you are now serving it to others in the hope that you would benefit them in some way. And so to me, I think creativity is service. A creative life is an act of service. It's finding ways to serve people with what you already have within you, or something that you can invent, and sometimes it's just I invented a new recipe or something like that, but it's creative. So I think creativity is service.
Excellent. Well, Shavaz, it was wonderful to catch up with you. Thank you so much for being on the show. And listeners, please check the show notes for ways to connect with Shavaz and to learn more about him.
Awesome. Thanks, Tammy. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Like the show? Have a question? Stop by the Facebook and Instagram pages. Links are in the show notes, or search for Creative Piecemeal Podcast on social media and click follow for all the latest.